Alright, the next thing I want to do is get a character in here, and I got a pack of 2D characters from a Humble Bundle that I'm going to use for this project. And I like this little alien guy. I'm going to put him in here. And the only thing I've added on here is this box collider. Um, and I just had that fit just the base of his body. We're not going to be using gravity or ground detection at this time because I'm just going to have him move from waypoint to waypoint. And I think a good way to do this is to have it so that he's going to start out probably in this first room, and then our game plan is that he's going to move to this room, and let's just hide our fader for now. I'll do that for each of these. So our alien's going to come in here, the room's going to fade, and we're going to see everything inside. If there's enemies, he'll go into combat. If there's an item, it'll be sparkling, we can grab that. And the door will be open for him so he can move to the next room. Same thing, if there's enemies, an item, we can grab it. The door's open after combat. If we are in combat, I want the door to stay locked until combat is concluded. And then we get to we'll have this probably be our tutorial level. And maybe we'll have a small boss here. And once he fights this boss, we'll probably have some dialogue, and then I think we'll have some type of mission complete screen or the ability to go back to our base at this point. I'm going to bring that back, and if you notice here, my character, he's in front of this sprite that I made. So the reason that this is happening is because we have different layers set up for our sprite. Now I am using a 2D character, similar to what Fallout does, because in Fallout Shelter, they've got these 3D environments, but all the characters are 2D. So let me bring my alien back over to this side so I can see everything. And your character might be different than mine, but we have these sorting layers here, and I could change this. There's tags, sorting layers, and layers. Sorting layers is for the sprites and 2D objects that we have here. I'm just going to have probably a foreground, maybe a background one, and I'll have one in the front called specifically for room faders. And maybe that should be right at the top here. Let's set that up so that now says room fader, and let's see if our character goes through that. Great, so we can see our character is now behind that. And if your character has various parts like this, like maybe your legs are in front of the torso and you don't want that, or his eyes are kind of stuck behind the head, you can set up these sorting layers just kind of like how I did here. I have his eyes at 10, I have the head at 9, and I just kind of made it so that these parts are not overlapping on the same layer, so that like his back hand will always be behind his torso, his front hand will always be in front of the torso. And again, that's all going to depend on the type of character that you're using, the source that you got it from, if there are different pieces, and if it's already set up or not. So this is something I had to set up myself. It took a little bit of time, but it's worth it to make your character look correct. This character also came with a few animations, so this is probably all you're going to need: running, idle, hurt, firing, and dying. And we'll create a animation manager to trigger depending on what we're trying to do. So if our character is moving from waypoint A to waypoint B, we want him to start running, but when he gets there, we want him to stop and go into that idle animation. So the next thing I want to do is create this waypoint system specifically for our character. So in each room, I want to open the prefab, and I'm going to create a new empty object. And this is just going to be called waypoint. I'm just going to say waypoint for player. And I'm going to stick it probably in the same spot our player is at. I can't select the player because I'm in the prefab, so let me jump out, check his position. I'm going to copy that. I'm going to jump back in here, and I'm going to paste that in and see if it's in the right spot. It's not, but it's close, so let's get it probably right there. I think is good. So now I'm going to copy this, and I'm going to head back to our next prefab. I'm going to do this in each one. I'm also going to set our waypoints to have this little indicator here. I'm going to make it, I guess, green for our player. Great, now we can see where each of the waypoints are for our player and where he's going to travel to. And these waypoints here, these are editor only, so as you can see in our game view, we're not going to see those in actual gameplay footage. So I want to be able to select a room, click on it, have our character move, and in Fallout Shelter, when you click on a room, this highlight comes around the entire room. So I made a simple neon green square. I'm going to change that over to a 2D sprite, hit apply, and similar to how we had the room fader, I'm going to set this up on each of the prefabs. So I'll do this one first, and I'm just going to size it on there. I'm changing this to the foreground so that it will be in front of our room fader, because if I don't, you can see in the game window here, it gets kind of clipped behind it. So I'm going to set that up as foreground. And I'm going to copy this over to each other prefab. Great, and you can see that our edges here are a little stretched out. That's because we literally did just stretch the sprite to fit onto this. So the proper way to do this would be to create, instead of a square, we'd have a rectangle and match that ratio. So for a 2-slot room, it would be a rectangle twice as wide. For the 3-slot room, it would be a rectangle 3 times as wide. So I just created these real quick. I'm going to go in and replace my stretchy squares. Great, that looks good. Now, similar how we did the room fader, I want to make an animation for these highlight squares as well. So we have a fade in and a fade out. I'm going to press record. And if we're going to fade out, we'll have it on. And we'll try 1 second. If we need to change it, we could adjust that later. So that fades out. I think I will change that to half a second. Let's try that again. I think that's a good speed. So I'm going to copy these, and then I'm going to go to the fade in, and I'm just going to switch the positions. Yep, So that just fades it right in. And similar to the other one, we're going to tell it not to loop. So I'll click my controller so I can quick find where everything is. I'm going to save my project. And I'm going to go to the animator. And if you don't have the animator tab, it's under animations, then animator in this Windows dropdown. And so this is basically how this structure works. When the game starts, it's going to go to a default one. So right now it's going to go to visible. So that's for the room, not for the squares. Let's go to our squares. Here we go. So it's going to go to fade in to start. So we don't want that. We want everything to be off initially when we first start the game. So let's make a third one. And we'll just call this highlight idle, or just highlight off. And I'll hit record. And I'm just going to change that sprite renderer to invisible. So I want this to be our default state, set as layer default state. And I'm going to, let's see, fade in makes it appear. So this will go from being off to appearing. Appear can fade out. Fade out can turn off. I think that makes sense. Now, we don't want to just have these playing non-stop like this, so I'm turning off these exit timers. I'm going to set a parameter up here, and then I'm going to set an int. I'm going to call this anim state. So if the anim state in our conditions here equals 0, our highlight is off. If our state equals 1, it's going to fade in. And if it equals 2, it's going to fade out. So we have a nice small system here. But right now, nothing is triggering these. Let's create a folder in our assets called scripts. And in our scripts folder, let's create a script called animation manager. So in this script, I want to do a couple things. I want to reference our animator. I want to be able to change our animation clip. And I want to be able to trigger the animation clip. And this will just make things easier to manage while we're in game and making references. I like to do serialized field and private int. So basically, you could do it like this. I like to hit enter. Serialized field makes it so that we can still view our private integers or variables that we're creating, similar to how you could view it if it was public. I try not to make things public unless I absolutely need to reference it from somewhere else, so I'll generally use that serialized field. Now for our set integer, we're going to need the string name. So we know our value is going to be this starting clip. Let's go back to Unity. We chose to use anim state. I'm going to use this for all of our animation systems. I'm always going to use the integer with anim state. For me personally, it's just easy to manage that way. So far what this script is doing is at the start of the game, we're going to find that component for the animator, and we're going to grab whatever the starting clip is, and we're just going to set that number right here. So if it starts at 1, 2, or 0, that's all it's going to do is change this number. And if that number changes, depending on what this number is where this decides to navigate to. So if we start at 1 at the start of the game, this is going to say, hey, our condition is met, we're at 1, let's go fade in. But we don't want that to fade in at start. We're going to make it so that something else is going to trigger that. So we're starting clips for this specific one, or it's going to be 0. Now I am going to make these ones public. This is going to be a public change animation clip. Alright, so if we make this reference to this script from another source, we can just reference it as change animation clip, and we'll just put a number in here, and it will set that integer to that clip and play whatever animation we have set up. I'm going to put this on each of our highlight squares. I'm also going to put it on each of our room faders. And at this time, I'm going to keep them all at 0. Now, our room faders, we didn't set how this works yet. So for this one, I want the solid black to be the default. And then only if we trigger it, should it become visible. I don't think there's any reason to make it go back to solid. I think once it's visible, it'll stay visible. So we can just have this one way. And similar, I'm going to set a condition. We didn't create our parameter yet, so that's why I'm getting an error here. So if I set an int, again, I like to use atom state. We'll set it to 1. Oh, let me get rid of that. Equals 1. So we're starting out at 0, which is just default. We're going to just start out on this solid. And then if we decide to change it, if we trigger that to 1, our room fader is going to become visible. So I should be able to test that out. So if we change this to 1, we fade in. That looks pretty good. Now, for some reason, we don't have this set up, so maybe I only did that for a specific one. So let me make sure that's set up for all of them. Or what I could do is I could search for our highlight squares. Yeah, so I only had that set up for 1. I'm going to copy this animation, or animator component. I'm going to paste that into each of these. It's going to have the same controller. I believe that should be fine. So we can test that out here. If I go to our square, let's go to our animator. See if I change this to 1. Looks like we highlight. I'll change it to 2. Fades away. And if I go back to 0, we just stay off. Now, here's something I forgot. I forgot to turn my looping off. So I want to do that. So we need to create a system to select the objects. Specifically select our room, or select a player, or an enemy. So I'm going to create a level manager. I'm also going to create a game manager. These are just empty objects right now. I'm also going to create a script under our scripts folder, and this is just going to be called select the objects, or select object. For our highlighted squares, I'm going to make a box collider on each of these because that's what our trigger or our raycast is going to be um, basically hitting into. So it looks like, honestly, I think that's good the way it was. It takes up just the front of that screen. Let's just make sure they're not overlapping, which it does look like they are a little bit, so I will change that. There we go. Just because we don't want to highlight the same thing at the same time. Now we can see these bigger rooms are going to need some adjustments. Cool. Looks like we're in good shape on all of these. So our script should probably go on our level manager. I like to start out by putting a description at the top here. We want to use a raycast to select an object. Selected object animation should change. So I'm going to need to make a reference to similar to what that says here. And we don't need that bracket at the end. So I like to structure it like that. So we'll have our serialized field with our private game object, raycast object hit. That object hit is, that's going to tell us what we're actually selecting. And that'll be our reference point for referencing animations and changing things. So let's set up our raycast. So basically what this saying is get mouse button down, which is mouse button 0, that would be my left click. It will use a ray, and that input is going to be the mouse position. And we have our raycast, not command, it would be raycast hit. And then we want it so that if we hit an object, then our raycast object hit will equal whatever it is we hit. And we could see that in the interface, but we could also set up like a debug log here as well. So if I hit play, we can see we have our variable here. Let's use our game window. So I am selecting a highlight square. Can I select anything else? No. They're all called the same thing, so if I change the name, let's go in here. Let's put a bunch of numbers there. We can see we selected that one, and then we selected the one in the room to the right. Now that won't save because that was in play mode, so that's back to being the correct name. So that's cool, we can select something, but we're not actually doing anything with the thing we selected. So let's see if we can get this highlight to animate. So I made this reference for the animation manager that we wrote here, and I created this private void method here so that we can just kind of easily control whatever we want to change the animation to. And I'm just going to change this here to 3. I believe that's correct. Might be 2 actually. So when we select the object, it should change the animation to anim state 2. We are getting an error. So I made this, I have a reference here, but I never actually made it a reference to anything. So if we're going to, we want to make it so that the selected object is the reference. So to do that, we'll type in selected object animation manager equals our raycast object hit dot get component, and that will be the animation manager. And then when we try to change the animation, it knows what we're actually trying to reference, as long as the raycast object that we hit has an animation manager. So we're hitting it, but I'm not seeing any changes. So that's because we're going to 2 instead of 1. So let's change that to a 1. Cool. Now the problem is that we are stuck with these green squares, so we want to make it so that they fade away. I don't need this debug anymore. I can get rid of that. And up here, I'm going to say if our selected object, yeah, it is not null. And the AI is getting crazy. But it keeps giving me extra brackets. It's not crazy enough. We'll change our animation. I think it was to 2. So the way this works is that this is going to change our animation for what was selected prior to what we're clicking, if that makes sense. So basically, if I select room 1, this does nothing. It's going to change room 1 to animation 1. But now when I select room 2, it's going to change room 1's animation to state 2, and then room 2 will change to 1. Now if I select room 3, for example, room 2 will change to state 2, room 3 will change to state 1. Now we do need to adjust our animator, because we change to 1, and then we can change to 2, but then we don't change back to the fade in. So I do want to make that transition back. And that will equal 1. And we want to make sure the exit timers are off, or we'll have some weird looping. Cool. So we're now able to select a room. We have our animation. The player knows what room he's actually selecting. And by doing this, now we can start making references to other objects within our room. So if I go into my prefab, let's do our second room here, since we have a room fader on there. This is the object being hit. This is our highlight square. So I'm actually going to rename this. I'm going to call it room preferences. These are also really messy, so I'm going to clean this up a little bit. I'm going to create an empty game object, and I'm just going to call this environment, objects, and basically all the stuff that's just there for show, I'm going to put in there. Okay, and I'm just going to clean up the rest of my objects. The only reason I'm leaving the door out is because I am going to animate that later. I could put it in there, but I kind of want it to stick out just so I have that better point of reference later on.